Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the From Brokenness to Fullness podcast. If you've been following this obedience series, you already know that obedience is powerful, freeing, and full of blessing. But today, we are going to talk about the real reason obedience feels hard for many Christians. Because most of the time, it's not rebellion. It's not lack of faith. It's not that we don't love God. It's the obstacles that quietly get in the way. Today's episode is called The Obstacles That Block Obedience. And my prayer is that by the end of this episode, you won't feel condemned, but you'll feel clear, aware, and empowered. So, first, let's talk about why obedience feels hard. You see, obedience feels hard because it usually asks us to do one of the three things. First is to let go. And it's hard to let go, right? Step out. That's the second one. And it's not comfortable. And third is to trust God beyond what we can see. But we always want guarantee. We always want to see the bigger picture, make sure everything is all right at the end of the tunnel. So it's hard. And that's not comfortable, especially for our human nature. But here's the truth. If obedience feels blocked, it is usually because something else has taken priority over God's voice. So let's talk about the most common obstacles. First, fear. Fear is the biggest blocker of obedience. You know, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of loss, and fear of the unknown. Fear says, what if it doesn't work? On the other hand, faith says, what if God is faithful? I don't even know if it is the right question to ask because God is always faithful. Isaiah 41:10 reminds us to not fear, for I am with you. Fear doesn't mean God isn't speaking. It means obedience will require trust. Second, comfort and convenience. I always remember in the past, I would always tell myself, I just want a comfortable life. I mean, who else doesn't want convenience and comfort? But sometimes The obstacle isn't fear, it's comfort. We know what God is asking, but obedience would disrupt our routine, convenience, moreover, sense of control. You see, comfort says, stay where you are safe. But calling says, step into what will grow you. God never called us to a comfortable faith. He called us to a fruitful one. And it's not easy, but it requires your part. Third, pride and self-reliance. I've always been so proud. I've always been so independent. Independent from others, independent from God. What does it mean then? I always depend on myself, my capability, my capacity. But that left me overwhelmed. You see, pride doesn't always look arrogant. Sometimes it looks like, whew, you have to listen to this. Sometimes it looks like I can figure this out on my own. I don't need help. Sound pretty familiar? And what else? I'll obey once it makes sense. But Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us to trust God instead of leaning on our own understanding. Yes, obedience requires humility. The humility to admit that God knows better. Fourth, distractions and noise. Distractions don't usually scream, they whisper. Endless scrolling, constant busyness, noise here and there, overcommitment, never slowing down. Yes, when life is noisy, God's voice feels distant. Not because he left, but because we stopped listening. My friend, stillness is not laziness. It is spiritual discipline. Finally, number 5, unhealed wounds, past trauma. Sometimes we don't obey because past pain taught us to protect ourselves. Rejection, betrayal, disappointment, failure. pain says, don't trust again. But God says, I heal so you can move forward. Obedience or disobedience, rather, is often self protection in disguise. Healing opens the door to obedience. So, my friend, please prioritize your healing. Heal well. There were seasons when I thought I was being disobedient, but really, I was afraid. I was tired. I was hurt. I was overwhelmed. But once I named the obstacle, I could surrender it to God. Yeah, and you can too. And that's what God wants from us. Not perfection, but honesty. Let me leave you with this. You don't overcome obstacles to obedience by trying harder. You overcome them by bringing them to God. So ask Him, what is blocking my obedience right now? And then listen, not with fear, but with trust. Next week, we are talking about something so powerful: obedience in the waiting season. And you don't want to miss that. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to share this with a friend or with your loved ones so we can grow together. Until then, I love you and God bless. Bye for now.